Welcome to the Financial Freedom Guy podcast. I'm here with my friend David, and I'll tell you what, David is the CEO of WinWorks, and every time I talk to David, we have a shared bond about people. How do you elevate people? He happens to be an expert in that, right? I'm going to say organizational development. Is that a good broad category, David?
Absolutely, that's our niche.
Yeah, I want to get right into it. So, David, I mean, it really is. I mean, people say it all the time. It's about people, right? And it really is about people. No matter what machines you have, no matter what AI is coming, no matter what robotics, there's still people who are going to really make it work, or make things not work, or make things just less effective, right? And something like that. So what, like, your number one problem, what problem do you solve with organizations?
Yeah, great question. So our number one problem that we go after is organizational dysfunction. Now, organizational dysfunction can present itself in many different ways, from issues with sales, or we're not hitting our KPIs or metrics, what have you, to cultural issues, conflict issues. So it really ranges from pure people-driven issues to systemic organization-wide issues. And that's part of why I like organizational development so much, is it looks at both the people involved and the systems and processes in which they operate. Because at the end of the day, if you have really good people, right, really good people can make up for a lot of deficiencies in terms of bad systems, bad tools, bad processes, right? And so sometimes you can have team members that actually hide the deficiencies of an organization that a leader doesn't ever see. But more often than not, when you have good people put within a bad system, the system wins. So you really need to be able to look at both sides so that we can root out organizational dysfunction wherever it lives. If it's wrong people in the wrong seat on the bus, or if it's lack of oversight or too much control to the point where we've blocked out the ability for individuals to make responsible choices and exercise reasonable autonomy. Right? It's really about getting the balance right and looking at the totality.
Well, let's go a little bit deeper into like how does it show up? If a business owner, I'm going to say small private business, but small private business means a lot, from like $1 million to 50 million on up, right? And it's the business is different at each stage. So how does it show up when there's dysfunction? And I'm thinking about it from the CEO's perspective. Paint a picture. I mean, what's going on? How does it show up for them? What are they feeling, experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our experience, the way that organizational dysfunction shows up happens very differently depending on where an organization is in its life cycle, right? So for example, if you're talking about a startup organization, their primary objective is survival. So oftentimes they are struggling with issues of anything from product or service design, pricing decisions, accidental perverse incentives, where all of a sudden they realize, well, wait a minute, the thing that we really need sold and driven out the door to make our business fly is not actually the thing that our incentive system most heavily rewards, right? And so kind of just figuring out what way is up, how are we going to organize the work so that we have consistent messaging that is all geared towards, and consistent activity that's all geared towards the North Star of the leader, founder, or co-founder's vision for the business, right? So it's a lot of kind of breaking new ground and establishing new trails and ways of doing things. On the flip side, if you have a mature organization, right, usually the way that organizational dysfunction will show up for a mature firm is through things like scope creep, or interpersonal conflict, right? So all of a sudden, we may miss our sales targets for the third or fourth quarter in a row. The business has tried a bunch of different interventions, and we can't figure out, well, why aren't we able to get back to growth? Or we may see an uptick in turnover, right? Or we may fail to bring in the new talent that we've been trying to, court and recruit for the last X number of months, right? This is the third candidate in a row that we've given an offer to who said no thanks, right?
Yeah.
All of those things are symptoms of underlying dysfunctions that are often caused by things like having too many products and services, right? We had a vision for the organization, but it wasn't distilled to the point where it not only told us the projects and things that we should say yes to, but it didn't tell us the ones that we should say no to, right? So those larger organizations tend to lose focus. So it's really about coming in and refocusing and realigning.
Yeah.
In the midpoint of the organizational life cycle, you have these transitional firms who have figured out how to stay alive, right? They've made it through their startup phase. And when they go into this mode of hyper growth, at least compared to the ramen profitability often of that early startup phase, they will often find themselves in a position where they look up and they realize, oh my gosh, we've just brought on 20 new people, for example. Mm-hmm. Well, 20 new people is 4 times the size of that original core team of 4 or 5 people that made the business successful in its early days. Yeah. And now we have a culture issue, right? Because those new folks don't have the organizational history. There's lots of new ideas, new blood, new excitement. And a lot of times organizations struggle with that transitional phase because they're not necessarily equipped to take in the best of breed of those new ideas, harness the excitement of those new people without losing the core identity of who they are as a company and how they went about executing on the things that made them successful.
And all that's operating is intangible, right? It's not like it shows up at the door and it's in a package and, oh, this is a group teams. And I see it, I'll break down to, I see it where they're like, if there's a certain level of tension, right? You just kind of feel it, people are tense and it's prolonged, it's not resolved, like something that probably could be, if you get to the root cause, could be solved quickly. It's just there. Sometimes month after month, year after year, it's there. And then along with that, there's role confusion. People don't know how this part fits with that part, and it persists. Like role confusion on some levels, pretty easy to figure out. Say, hey, what needs to be done? What do you do? What do I do? Let's update our playbooks if we communicate it clearly. So it's black and white. We know what you do and I do, and we're not robots. As it evolves, we evolve with it. We evolve our playbooks, but it's not. I say not uncommon. It's frequent. That happens. Right, it's just like, oh man, we used to be really a high effective, whatever level team that founder group is, on point. To now, it's like, oh, and there's tension. Yeah, is that a way of thinking about this?
Absolutely. So, and sometimes those things come on slowly over time through things like scope creep, right? Like people remember, oh, I remember back in the days when things were simple, And if you actually roll the clock back, they're right. Things were simple, right? When you only had one product and one sales guy, it was real easy to hold that person accountable, right? But now we've got a team of 10 and we've got 13 products, right? Well, the reason why we look back fondly on simpler times is because they were indeed simpler, right? The other kind of conceptual framework that I think helps unpack some of those dynamics is the idea of what's called punctuated equilibrium. Right? When we think about change, we tend to think about change as a gradual thing, right? If a company went from $1 million of revenue 10 years ago and now they're at 10, the heuristics in our brain naturally fill in an even glide path and say, oh, they must have added, 1 million of sales per year. Yep, like a clock, right? But the reality is, when you look at how change actually happens, it doesn't happen gradually. It happens in these kind of episodic shifts, right? Something comes along to upset the balance. In a positive way, it drives growth, right? This year, our revenue was at 2 million, and something happened. We got traction, technology shift, a consumer preference shift, whatever it is. And now all of a sudden, our revenue last year went from 2 million to this year we're at 6, right? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of scrambling that goes with that. The same thing happens internally, right? We've figured out kind of a way of doing things, and then something comes to upset the apple cart, and we have to adjust in a hurry, right? The software vendor that we've used for years for providing this service or organizing this workflow, right, decides that they're going to retire that product or change the pricing model that changes the unit economics that we built our business on, right? All of those things demand a pretty rapid response to change that is anything but gradual. And when you have folks that are focused on trying to make the day-to-day nuts and bolts of the business hang together, that's often the type of situation of organizational dysfunction that makes them aware of the fact that we need some help. And that's really what the team at WhenWorks is designed to do, is to help step into those situations and say, look, you need to run your business. Let us help you figure out how to deal with the organizational challenges that you're having, and do so in a systematic, purposeful, intentional way that acknowledges both the people operating within your business and the systems and structures you've put in place around leadership, culture, strategy, your mobilized vision, your business model, people development strategy, operations, technology. All of that has to be considered if we're going to get it right.
Yeah, and that allows the business owner to operate at the leadership, visionary level, elevating people. That's the right role for them. If they get into they're punishing the team members and pointing out gaps and stuff, they lose literally their stature with other people starts to be it's anchored at a lower place, and they're becoming less effective, and frustration, that kind of stuff. And so really interesting. And then let's talk about another aspect of how this shows up. I mean, the financial guy, I got to do this. When those things are going on, it shows up financially, right? And it shows up. It could be very acute in a given business where, man, we don't have money for payroll next week, or paying vendors slow, so vendors slow up differently, and then even beyond the individual business internally, how does that business compare to the industry benchmarks, right? If they're if they're the top 80% average and better and stuff, then from an effectiveness standpoint, you can say, okay, right, doing well. If we're in the lower part of that, it's really no judgment. Really good to see. I'm here in the bottom percentile, and I can start to ask why. And I can start to see where there's other businesses are in my industry are more effective versus less effective. Very useful, because household income, and then if I'm in at least average or better in my industry, I got the value of my business. I can defend the higher valuation and the second payday and financial freedom. Have you, like, from your vantage point, when these dysfunctions are going on with people, what are you seeing in how that shows up financially?
Sure. So the trick of it is that the same financial metric or financial warning sign may be caused by very different factors in different organizations, right? So let's say two organizations see a similar dip in profitability. Well, in one of those organizations, the reason for the dip may be they're experiencing a high amount of turnover, right? Turnover is incredibly expensive for organizations, both in terms of the direct cost of going out and finding somebody to replace that lost talent, and indirectly in the form of, if you lose your top sales guy, it's not just about how much it takes to replace him. It's about the fact that over 6 months or 3 months or however long it takes to find the new person and then bring them back up to a level of contribution that's even anywhere close to what the guy that we lost or the gal that we lost may have been able to do. That period where no one's at the controls, no one is in that seat on the bus, and the ramp up period is incredibly painful in terms of indirect costs from loss of productivity, right? So for company A, that may be the reason for the profitability downturn. On the flip side, you may have another company that sees the same numerical result, right, in their financial metrics and KPIs, but when you dig under the hood, you find out it has everything to do with speed of delivery, right? Sales is doing what they need to do. They're teeing it up, but there's for example, a pissing contest between two strong personalities on the fulfillment side of the business that is resulting in a 2 or 3 week or sometimes 2 or 3 month delay in the deliverables, which is then pushing back the ability to go from accounts receivable to money in house. Those two situations, while they can result in the same numbers, right, very different needs for solving that organizational dysfunction. In one, we need to look at, well, why did the guy leave, right? Was it a conflict issue, a culture issue, compensation issue, what's going on? And in the other, it's an interpersonal conflict and culture issue, right?
Which is lags. And when you speak, I hear a couple qualities, like there's mental agility, especially in the world where things change fast. So mental agility, be able to get it. And then there's speed, and no one should ever suggest that doing things, if it takes 8 hours, let it be done in 8 hours. And no one should ever suggest that speed means you're lessening quality, because then what's the point? But if it takes 8 hours, let it be done in 8 hours, not 8 days, right? And you can certainly see those. It'd be easy for team members not to see how those lags in delivery, how they don't. It's just I'll do it tomorrow. Easy thing to do, given that there's always plenty of other stuff to do, and don't see how those lags really impact the overall well-being and resources, that kind of stuff. So,
are you familiar with the concept of optimization versus satisficing? Is that a term you've ever heard before?
The second term I never heard before. Can you say that one more time?
Absolutely. Optimization, which is the one that most people are familiar with, versus satisficing.
I have no idea what that is. So enlighten me.
So it is an important concept because a lot of when I'm working with a leader, a lot of times they tell me that their people are awesome, they go above and beyond, and they get into this optimization mindset, which is a wonderful thing, right? People want to go the extra mile on everything and make everything as good as it can possibly be, right? Well, optimization is a double-edged sword, right? For the things that you're able to get done, they're done beautifully. But when you optimize everything, you usually will see the volume of things that you can get done decrease, right? So if it's possible, if the most possible things for me to get done is 20 in a given period of time, right? But I try to make every single one of those the best that they can possibly be, I may not be able to get 20 done. I may be more like 10, right? So the cost of optimization there is going from 20 units of productivity, whatever that is, down to 10, right?
Yeah.
And there are some areas of the business where you want that, right? However, there are other areas of the business where once you meet the minimum quality standards, going above and beyond that gives you no additional credit, right? It does not contribute to your odds of success or your final outcomes. And that's where the concept of satisficing comes in.
Yeah, nice.
Satisficing describes the process of identifying whatever that acceptable margin is, right? What is the lowest unit of acceptable quality, not in terms of something slapdash and how cheap can I do it, but truly identifying how good does something need to be consistent with who we are as a company, our brand standards, and fully deliver on our promises, right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about cutting corners, but once we've met that standard, it allows us to move on to the next thing and thereby unlocking a lot more productivity. So let's say if I cut all the corners, I could get 20 units done. If I optimized everything, I could get 10. But if we look at that satisficing perspective, maybe we can do 15 that fully meet our quality standards, fully deliver on our brand promise, fully deliver on our customer experience. Well, by shifting our mindset from every single one has to be perfect to more of a how do we optimize for quality and throughput, we've now unlocked a 50% increase in productivity from the same resources, the same people, and the same amount of time.
Yeah, and that's that's a powerful concept about. I'm a mirror back to you. It's about being intentional what the performance zone is, and don't waste another minute for overkill.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? And that's powerful because there is a tendency. I think it's driven by fear, where like perfection, even a concept of perfection, is driven by fear. It's got to be exactly right. There can't be any variance. Right? It's got to be 100%. It can't be 80%. When 80% is bam, remarkable. You got it done. The client gets the delivery early. They're happy. They want to do more with you. They get the outcomes they need. The 80% is good versus delaying for that. You can't get that last 5 units out because it's not perfect. I mean, that's a crippling concept. Perfection.
Well, and if you go ahead.
I was just say effectiveness you can get to. Perfection, what is it? What's useful in one situation is not useful in the next. And so it's an impossible concept anywhere. And I see people paralyze themselves and mess up their wedding and all that kind of stuff for that concept. Let it go. Relax.
Absolutely. Well, and when you layer that concept with a organizational and systems perspective, it actually compounds the effect. There's a wonderful kind of classic business text from many years ago. I'm sure you've heard of it. And some of your listeners certainly will have. There was a book called The Goal, right? And it told the story of a factory, right, that was having problems meeting its production quotas and things. And part of the realization, and it's an easy read for those that haven't read it. I encourage you to go buy it on Amazon or get it on your Kindle, because it comes in the form of a story. It's a fable, right? So not a whole lot of challenging vocabulary, but it lays out the concept of if you have a multi-part process, right? We'll keep it simple. If you have a 3-part process, the speed of the entire process is going to be governed by the slowest unit in that process, right? So if step 1 has a capacity of being able to do 100 widgets a day, step 3 can do 600 widgets a day, but step 2 in the middle can only do 50, then no matter what you do with that process, you're never going to get more than 50 units a day to burp out the end, because that speed of that middle process governs everything else, right? You ramp up step 1, you just end up with more work in process that now you have to work around before it can get through step 2, right? You crank up step 3, now you got people waiting and saying, well, come on, step two, give me the work, right? So the key is not to try to optimize every single part of the process. The key is to look at the process as a whole and say, how do we orchestrate across everything that we're doing? And that's where that concept of optimization and satisficing kind of get applied, right? So if we're talking to people at step one in that process, we say, look, you get no extra credit. In fact, it counts against us once you start cranking out your part of the process faster than the next guys can handle, right? So that's the line, that is our line of satisficing for you.
Yeah, that's excellent. So you're taking a total organizational approach, people, system. You're looking for those constraints, and then but the constraint within the context of the whole, definitely get measurable outcomes. That resonates with me. I like that. Right.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's kind of want to unpack a few things. Okay, there's some emerging technologies, right?
Mm-hmm.
AI is just one of them, but there's AI. It's general AI. You can talk to it. It's everywhere. It's like electricity. It's not just for night baseball. You can go ahead and see what you can apply it to. Very generalized, and it's linguistic kind of stuff. So you don't have to be a programmer. So there's that. There's robotics, right? If you haven't seen some of the robots like Optimus in Boston Dynamics, I encourage everybody to go take a look at the video on whatever social media you use. It is they have robots that can do construction, like hang sheetrock,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not insignificant, right? It's very significant. And then you have blockchain, right? Like this transparency, this whatever is recorded to it, it's validated by millions. Level of transparency and trading with unknown partners, and just what the possibilities are just off the charts. And there's Web3 where you own your data, not Google, not Amazon. Whoa. Their whole business model is based on them owning the data. Then what else? I mean, certainly crypto, is another one. Autonomous, not just autonomous cars, but autonomous transportation. There, at some point, you will not have a pilot on that plane that you're flying, or on the captain of the ship. You might have a guy around or a gal around, taking a look at things, but they don't fly themselves or navigate themselves, the ships, that kind of stuff. And then there's quantum computing, which blows all this up because it doesn't. There's a certain view of reality where things are only in one place, but now with this, wait a minute, it's the same thing in multiple places, and that's just incomprehensible. So from an organizational development standpoint, what are you seeing? Are companies going in like eyes open? What am I doing now on these? What do I expect to be doing in 3 years from these? Or are we just going to just business as usual? Maybe we'll automate our blog posts, right? And with some AI, I'm seeing more of part two, where people are not boldly going in with foresight, intentional. I see people, they'll do some stuff like, oh, let me ask chat to edit my email, right? Or my blog post or some marketing stuff. But that's not the power of fire, right? The fire can do a lot more than that.
Sure.
What are you seeing on how organizations are approaching this? Literally a new world that we're going into. 5, 10 years, 20 years, the world would be very different.
So if I can paraphrase your question, you said we're staring at a brave new world, and are people embracing the new tools and running as fast as they can, or are they sticking their head underneath the sand and ignoring that they even exist? And the answer to that question is yes. Right? You've accurately described the spectrum of human responses. I will say that one of the things that we're seeing is that there's kind of the bulk of the innovation and people willing to embrace the new tools and things wholesale. There's more companies in the startup space that are doing that. And it makes sense, right? The less you have to lose, the more you can afford to place big bets, right? Because you've heard the phrase "don't gamble with the mortgage money." Well, young companies and startups, they don't have a mortgage to begin with, right? So they don't have to worry about gambling with the mortgage money. But on the flip side, these larger, more mature organizations do have more to lose. So a lot of times they're coming at it from a risk management mindset rather than a opportunity mindset of where can we position ourselves for growth. Now, within that generalization, there are plenty of established transitional and mature organizations that are carving out protected spaces where they can invest time, talent, and money in seeing which of these new tools and resources actually work. And we're seeing a lot of that, and frankly, it's also something that a lot of the providers are doing for companies, right? You mentioned Google building their entire business off of data, right? Well, they're now offering products that they've tested, they've developed to established organizations so that they can adopt it in a way that has the least amount of risk for these established organizations for the most potential gain. So we're seeing them creep in everywhere, but how they creep in and how they affect the fundamental business model of an organization, its workflows, and ultimately the culture that grows out of those interactions of the people within the organization is very different depending on the kind of structure and business model of the business itself.
I mean, those are fascinating, different approaches. That's fascinating. And I'm gonna throw it out there as well. The like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is the first mover. It has like $1 trillion market cap. It's still frontier stuff. It's volatile, but over time, you know, like if you look at a 3 to 4 year time horizon, you know, crypto, it's only been gains. But my assessment, I just barely taken my first step into crypto. My assessment is that like the world global economy has been based on the dollar, right? And it used to be a gold standard. You know, 1944, Bretton Woods, gold standard. Nixon stopped doing that. And then as the trading blocks change, you know, you have Brazil, India, Russia, China created their own currency, you know, block of currency, literally to compete with dollars. So there's someplace else to go. Certainly on some level, precious metals, that kind of stuff. My assessment is that cryptocurrency is going to be another alternative to demand, and it's from an inflation standpoint. You know, the U.S. dollar is all based on a central bank and politics, and it's not supposed to be, but it is. And printing money has been something, and we've been able to borrow beyond our means because of the strength of our dollar, going back to World War II, which is a different world now. An increasingly different world now. I think crypto is one of those technologies. You know, it'd be smart for businesses to take a first step, because at some point your clients will want to pay you in crypto. Bitcoin is the most established, and there's only a handful of currencies outside the control of anybody, which is a pro and a con. Crypto is one of them. Most cryptocurrencies somebody controls, so they, you know, it's like having a central bank. What is that coming up in organizational development, where people are thinking about these other, like specifically cryptocurrencies, not just other currencies?
Sure.
Is that coming up?
So yes, it is. However, it's much more so in the startup space. For mature and transitional organizations, there's usually more attention paid to kind of currency exchange rates, right? So if I've got half my organization is in the United States and half my organization is in Canada, for example, trying to rectify the value of the different sides of the business on each side of the border, especially when those currency exchange rates fluctuate, can be pretty difficult. Well, take that challenge and dial it up to 11 to channel Spinal Tap, and that's that's the impact of moving towards cryptocurrency has. The issue with cryptocurrency is that it is highly volatile, right? So it exacerbates valuation challenges associated with fluctuating values. And there's a lot of options, right? So you got Bitcoin, you've got Ethereum, you've got Dogecoin, you've got all of these things, and there is very little barrier to entry for somebody spinning up a new digital currency, right? So the advantage of a centralized control system is exactly that, right? The advantage is also the weakness, right? It's controlled by a central system, which creates barriers to entry and limits substitutions. So to my mind, the bigger opportunity as it relates to digital currency from an organizational development standpoint is less which digital currency do we want to use or embrace, and more about the underlying technology of public ledger, blockchain type resources that underlies all digital currencies, right? What is it that makes those work? And that's an opportunity for decentralized systems and controls that, frankly, organizations need in an increasingly diverse landscape in which they're doing business on a hybrid basis, right? You may have some employees working in a traditional office in one part of the world and others spread across the globe, right? And the technology that you need to create a cohesive team out of that kind of disparate work situation actually really demands the type of technology that allows for decentralized control for these distributed systems that still can roll up into a cohesive set of tools and resources for leaders to see how their business is performing.
David, that is an excellent point, right? You go to the blockchain just to illustrate, I'm going to suggest that the growth CFO, the head accountant, the controller, this is an area they can lead on, right? Because with a block system accounting system, that third entry to the block system, you got transparency. If you're doing inventory management on the block system, you got an accurate count, right? The need for inspection audits and accurate. And then if you're transferring not just globally but regionally between, you got different operating units. If it's on the block system, you got that accurate information right now that the users can act on. And that's, literally from a competitive advantage standpoint, the companies who tap that are going to be playing on a different level of effectiveness than in that satisfied zone that you're describing than somebody who's not. It's like the difference between driving with your eyes open and closed. Maybe that's dramatic. How about a radar system if you're flying a plane? A radar system versus just looking out the window, right? The one with the radar is going to be able to fly a lot more accurately, right?
Absolutely. Well, and the good news is there are tools that exist that will help leaders understand when some of these technologies are game ready and when they're not. So, for example, right now, if you were to go into the digital currency space, you're going to have to pick which horse to bet on, right? Do I go with Ethereum, or do I go with Bitcoin, or do I go with any of these others, right? So there's always going to be a winner and loser, and there's a possibility that you might pick wrong, right? But let's take another technology that we talked about earlier, self-driving, right? Technology. If I'm in the transportation and logistics business, what am I looking for that will tell me when it's time to make that investment in autonomous vehicles because they're going to be more efficient for my business? Well, a lot of people get distracted by the press releases, right? The what's the latest hype video that just got released on what social media thing? That's not actually the tell. The tell is pay attention to the insurance industry. Watch for the actuaries. When the actuaries determine that it is cheaper to insure a self-driving vehicle because it is safer in day-to-day operation than a vehicle that has a human behind the wheel, that's going to be the signal that will let business owners know, okay, any one driver in my logistics business may be better or worse than the state of the current technology, but as a whole, a technologically controlled fleet of cars is a safer risk pool than a similar fleet of cars driven by human operators, that is now the time for a organizational move towards adopting that technology on a large scale.
That is brilliant. I mean, because they put a lot of time and effort and to figure out when it's hitting those tipping points that you can ride that wave. In addition to what you're seeing in your own eyes, you got that data, third-party validation, and to seize the moment. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So let's go before we land. I want to talk about accountability, right? So organizational development. Technology is just a tool. I just want to be clear. It's a better whatever tool you're using. And if we were still building houses with rocks, they hammer things in, probably not going to get the same outcome as that power hammer company, right? And so it's just a tool. And how do you get people that can embrace the better tools at the right time, in the right way, where they're effective in that satisfied performance zone. I want to come to it. The head in sand approach, well, it's not going to end well. Right, you're going to feel the pressure on income, the pressure on household income, that the value of your business is shrinking, right? And it's not fun, right? That part of the curve is the other part of the curve where you're healthy, you got more resources, and way more fun. So I think the advice that you're given is literally whatever it takes, it makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about accountability. So you got this environment, this system-wide approach. How do you drive accountability to whatever level that you want to talk about that level, to, whether it's team or person, company? How do you think about that?
Absolutely. So struggling with accountability is actually one of the most common symptoms of organizational dysfunction that I come across in working with founders, CEOs, and even board members across, regardless of where they are in the organizational life cycle, from startup to mature. And it usually presents itself in the form of not accountability directly, but we're having trouble with delegation. Right. That's usually where it shows up in conversation, and you start pulling the sweater thread and you find your way to, the reason why we can't delegate is because we can't hold anybody accountable for what we tried to delegate to them. Right. And actually the conversation around AI and technology is taking that same struggle and scaling it up across the organization, because a whole lot of people are now looking at the capabilities of these large language models, taking it one step further into not just AI chat interaction, but actual AI agents that can execute things in the real world in a similar way that a actual human or employee could. So digital employees doing the work. Well, when we think about what are we delegating to people, delegation fails when accountability does not exist. And a lot of people don't understand what accountability is. It's treated as a black box, and they skip over the black box and go straight to consequences, right? So when you talk about holding someone accountable, most of the time you think about rewarding them for success, or more often, what's the consequences of failure, right? Yeah. But if you actually look at what accountability itself is, there's always a couple of common points. Number one is we have to understand the three foundational elements of accountability, and that's understanding who the people involved are, or the respondents. I call these the 3 R's: the respondents, the results, and the records, right? So who is involved, what happened, and how do we know what happened, right? Those 3 R's exist within a context, right? So we need to understand what's the relationship setting, what's the level between the different respondents, right? Are we talking peer-to-peer, or is this supervisor to supervisee? Is this board to executive team, right? What's the relationship between those respondents? And what are the mechanisms of communication, right? And is this accountability happening at an individual, group, social, professional, legal, organizational, political level, right? All of those have models, or I should say norms of accountability that function slightly differently. Well, once we're clear on our 3 R's, then we go into what I call the moral lens, right? And the moral lens is the framework through which we tell ourselves a story about how to interpret what happened, right? If you have 10% sales growth, right, that may be a wonderful thing if the industry was flat, or maybe the industry average was 8%, we grew 10, woohoo, right? We're now happy about that. Because of that context, we're clear on who drove the growth, what actually happened. We have records that show that that thing happened, right? We can unpack why, and then we assign a meaning to that given the context of, yay, 10% growth, we outperformed the market or our benchmark. On the flip side, that same 10% growth in a year where the industry grew 20%, same respondents, same results, same records, but now the rationale we assign to that through our moral lens, which is informed by our social expectations and normative standards, is that's terrible, right?
Yeah.
We lagged the industry by half, right? So really taking the time to be able to open up that black box and say, what is accountability, right? The root word of accountability is counting, right? Accounting, literally being able to understand what happened, who was involved, why did it happen, and now what should the consequence of reward or otherwise be as a result of what happened. And if we skip over that step and try to go straight to consequence, we often rob ourselves of the opportunity to understand and reverse engineer what positive outcomes we want to be able to drive again in the future, and what negative outcomes we would really like to be able to understand and be aware of before the fact, right? There's often a number of leading indicators that were present if we had known to look for them, but if we skip over that step, allow accountability to be a black box, we never learn what those leading indicators are. And so we're going to be just as blind the next time we may have an opportunity to see them.
Yeah, that is so useful. It doesn't matter if you're over, under, left, or right. Do that. Go into the black box. Use the numbers to figure out what to dig into, and then really go into the why. And then that just educates and informs and ups the skill level to know what the next thing is, with reward and punishment kind of stuff. But more importantly, with the business, what's the next step? And I really, from a number standpoint, a lot of people are very intimidated by the numbers, right? Because it does drive accountability. And so I would caution, like reward and punishment kind of thing, I would caution, man, the points of clarity, really make it a positive, safe experience. Because if it is, well, you're being punished. If it is, then with more of it. And if that person really is aligned with your vision, who you are as a business owner, they're going to just be excited and take that learning and feel confident and safe to use it for the next round. Yeah. That's where like as far as retaining employees versus not retaining employees, I'd play that more of a long-term thing. Long-term doesn't mean years, but if somebody's not hitting on all cylinders in first quarter, second quarter, there's something going on. But just be careful, because if there's a judgmental reaction, why didn't you sell all 10 cars? Things are going to shut down so fast. Yeah. And avoidance of looking at anything that's going to drive accountability is really a chance to put both hands on it.
That's where that accountability model is so valuable, because it walks you through saying, okay, yes, we have to look at what the results were, right? And how we know, how do we record those results so that we can see them later, right?
Yeah.
But it also prompts us to think through the setting and the context and the relationships that drove those, right? So talking about the guy that or gal that missed their numbers for 2 quarters in a row. Well, why? Is that because they had bunk numbers, right? Or is it because we brought them on halfway through Q1 and we didn't turn on whatever their resources, they didn't have access to resources until a month and a half in. So now we're trying to hold them responsible for Q2 results where they actually only had 20 fully productive days with no training, right? Context matters, right?
It
If
matters.
we just say the numbers are, and you're going to get hammered, context matters. It just does.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be brutal, right? Not human. Okay, so I want to highlight the coming for a landing. I want to highlight this is a skill, right? Most of us business owners don't know how to get in on that level, that kind of stuff. And either way, as a business owner, you want to stay up on the architect level, right?
Sure.
Vision, lead, positive, safe. Let other people get into some of the details. That way, your relationship is anchored at the right level to be effective and be able to lead people into whatever new frontier you might be going into or the next steps, depending on what it is. So this is a real skill, real expertise. And from a personal journey standpoint, I can't overstate the value of having the right expert on the team. And David is one of those people that I hold in the highest regard in expertise. Pretty sure a conversation with David will at least start creating options that could be more than mildly useful, like tremendously useful. So David, with that, what is the best way for people to contact you?
Absolutely. So if folks are interested in a conversation, reach out to me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at david.mcauley, MACAULEY, at wend, WEND.works, WORKS. Would be happy to have a conversation. I'm also happy to, Kirk, I'll provide you with a link to talk to book a conversation with me or one of the members of my team. And frankly, we would love to hear about your story, about your organization and the vision and North Star that you are trying to equip and support your team to pursue.
Yeah, and Dave, I'm going to encourage everybody in the audience. I mean, literally build a business so you have a life, you have prosperity, you're bringing your team members along, and it's just a healthier place to be. So with that, thank you for your time and attention. I'm the financial freedom guy, and David, thank you for joining me in your discussion. I'm making notes of things I can step up in these areas. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Kirk.